Discover the hidden, heartwarming truth behind Auschwitz. 75 years of resilience and hope exposed. Ruth stood in her cramped attic, sunlight filtering through the dusty window, revealing an old trunk that had been untouched for too long. As she brushed off the years of neglect, anticipation bubbled inside her. What stories lay hidden within? Her heart raced, sensing that this trunk could be more than just a relic. Within moments, she had the lid propped open. Excitement turned to grief and awe as she unfolded yellowed letters and faded photographs scattered across the trunk like forgotten dreams. It was her grandmother's past. A Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, a woman who had carried unspeakable trauma yet wove love into every thread of her life. Ruth couldn't believe it. The woman who taught her family the importance of kindness had faced unimaginable horrors. As she flipped through the papers, Ruth's tight chest began to ease. Her grandmother had written of resilience, heartwarming tales, moments that inspired hope even amid despair. Ruth could almost hear her voice echoing in the attic, reminding her never to give up. But a flicker of sadness glimmered. The weight of her grandmother's past felt both sacred and heavy. It ignited a fire within her, an urge to honor that legacy, to ensure that her son, Ben, understood the sacrifices made so many years ago. Back in her small town, Ruth faced a different challenge. Bills piled up and deadlines loomed larger than life. The economic downturn squeezed the very spirit from her community. But she wanted to galvanize her students, to teach them about compassion through history. So, she launched a local history project focusing on Holocaust survivors. Her heart raced when she saw the intrigue blossom in her students' eyes. They began to understand the essence of humanity, digging deep into empathy and dialogue. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as momentum grew, controversy erupted. Funding became a hot topic, tearing through the town like a wildfire. Old prejudices resurfaced, splintering friendships and threatening to pit resident against resident. Ruth couldn't believe it, her hopes for unity hung by a thread. Accusations slung her way stung like bee stings, all for trying to relay a message of understanding. She felt alone, yet determined. Each day spun her deeper into the throes of familial conflict. Ruth's estranged relatives were still grappling with the shadows of their pasts, their pain resonating even in the dim corners of her life. Willing to fight for a brighter future for Ben, she understood she would have to face these ghosts head-on. Amid the clamor of discord, as fingers pointed and voices raised, Ruth found herself channeling her grandmother's spirit. Before the assembly, she stood tall, ready to deliver her speech. Each word spilled from her heart, pleading for upliftment over division. Strangely, as she looked around the sea of faces, she saw flickers of understanding. Would her courage be enough to mend the very fabric of their community? Everything hung precariously in the balance as a local leader with hidden agendas plotted against her. Ruth clenched her fists, heart drumming, as a dark realization dawned. Her fight wasn't just for her future, it was for her entire town. Would she prevail, or were they too far gone? The answer awaited, lurking just beyond the horizon. The auditorium was packed. The murmurs filled the air like static electricity, a mix of confusion and curiosity. Ruth stood on the stage, her heart racing, each beat echoing like a drum in her chest. She had trained herself for this moment, rehearsed the words that clamored in her mind, but as she looked into the sea of skeptical faces, doubt crept in. Would they listen? Would they understand the importance of her message? She took a deep breath, trying to channel her grandmother's spirit, the woman who had faced down horrors yet never lost her belief in humanity. Ruth steadied herself, the weight of generations behind her. The microphone felt cool against her palm as she leaned forward, ready to speak. Today, I want to share stories of survival, of resilience, of hope, she began, her voice evolving from hesitant to firm. My grandmother's journey through Auschwitz taught us not just about suffering, but about compassion, kindness, and the need to stand against hatred in all its forms. A few heads began to nod. She caught the eye of a young student sitting in the back row, a boy whose family had been affected by the recent tensions. He needed this message, as much as anyone else. Ruth swallowed hard, weaving her grandmother's tales of strength and enduring love. She spoke of the bonds formed in the darkest of times, the laughter that broke the silence of despair, and the shared humanity that shined through the rubble of atrocity. As she spoke, the atmosphere tightened. It was as if she had cast a spell, wrapping everyone around her words. Some listeners shifted uncomfortably, their eyebrows knit in thought. Others sat with tears glistening in their eyes. She detailed how sharing these stories was a way to heal, a way to prevent history from repeating itself, yet, just as she gained momentum, she felt a sharp shift in the room. A figure emerged from the back. It was Daniel, the leader whose opposition hung like a storm cloud over her project. His eyes blazed with frustration. "This is nonsense," he shouted, interrupting her flow, his voice booming through the hall. "Why should we waste our resources on the past when our present needs fixing?" Gasps echoed, and murmurs swirled like leaves in the wind. Ruth's heart dropped, but her resolve hardened. "Because," she countered, her voice steady despite the tremor inside, "the past teaches us what happens when we ignore the humanity of others. By recognizing the pain, we cultivate understanding. Only then can we build a community that thrives on respect rather than division." A silence fell upon the crowd, thick with tension. Some looks of agreement flickered amidst the skeptics. She could almost feel the shifting tides. The fear of division clashed with the hunger for unity. Ruth pressed on, her passion igniting the air. "We are stronger together than apart. Each of us carries wounds, but it's through shared stories that we can find healing. Turn hatred in on itself, and it will consume you. Embrace empathy, and it will set you free." The room reacted slowly at first. A ripple of applause broke the tension, like a spark igniting a flame. Ruth felt a rush of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her words could change hearts tonight. But then, Daniel stepped forward, his expression unyielding as he declared, "If you think this ends here, you are mistaken. I won't allow this to destroy our community." As he turned to leave, a chill ran through Ruth. His threat hung heavily in the air, a dark cloud looming. The night was far from over. Uncertainty clawed at her stomach. There was much to fight for, and the battle was only beginning. Could Ruth withstand the opposition? And would her message of hope be enough to overcome the deep-rooted fears and biases within her community? The answer felt as distant as the stars, but it flickered like the ember of a flame ready to burst forth at any moment. Ruth stood frozen on the stage as the applause faded into an uneasy silence. The faces in the audience shifted, uncertain and conflicted, caught between her message and Daniel's looming threat. She took a moment to gather herself, scanning the crowd for familiar expressions: friends, old classmates, and even strangers who had come seeking something. She could feel their collective heartbeat, the same rhythm of hope that had guided her to this very moment. She noticed the young boy again, his face half hidden behind a curtain of dark hair, eyes wide and glimmering. He looked up at her, searching for something, the same answers she had been searching for when she first learned of her grandmother's experiences. That flicker of determination ignited her spirit once more. "Stories matter," she said, her voice rising again, though she could still feel Daniel's presence like a shadow at her back. "They matter because they connect us, teach us empathy, and remind us of our shared humanity. Without them, we risk drifting apart, lost in a sea of misunderstanding." From somewhere in the crowd, a woman shouted, "But what about our own struggles? What about today?" Ruth felt the heat of skepticism wash over her, but she pressed on. "Every generation faces struggles," she replied passionately, "and that's exactly why we must remember the past. It's not about ignoring today, it's about understanding how yesterday shapes our tomorrow. We carry the lessons of our ancestors, and their resilience can guide us through our challenges." Ruth could feel the tension in the room shift slightly. Some listeners shifted in their seats, others nodded. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Take my grandmother, for example, she continued, diving deeper into her story. She survived unspeakable horrors, but she emerged filled with love instead of bitterness. She spent her life teaching others the importance of kindness. That's the power of resilience. The room began to breathe again, hope flickering in the eyes of those around her. Ruth could feel it, that tidal wave of emotion swelling, urging her to keep going. She could not allow Daniel's skepticism to drown out the voices of those seeking understanding. Ruth's heart raced as she drew the story of her grandmother to a close. It is when we find the courage to share and listen that healing begins. It's in understanding our pain and celebrating our joys together that we can forge a brighter future. As her words echoed, she could see the young boy's eyes glisten once more, holding on to her words as if they were a lifeline, but just as she thought the tide was turning, Daniel made his way back towards the front. Ruth's pulse quickened. She was afraid of what he would say next, but she couldn't let that fear derail her. What you're doing is romanticizing the past, Ruth. The world isn't as simple as your grandmother's story. They won't be swayed by these tales. His voice boomed again, cutting through the fragile hope she had woven. The crowd reacted, a mix of dissent and support, but Ruth felt the words wrapping around her like a protective shield. We are not just tales, she shot back, her words firm with conviction. We are living examples of the very truths that we share. Stories don't diminish our present struggles, they empower us to face them courageously. Daniel crossed his arms, defiance rooted in his stance, but Ruth knew now that the struggle wasn't just hers. It was theirs, collective. As the applause started again, a little louder this time, Ruth felt a flicker of strength erupt within her. She had dared to disrupt the darkness, awakening the spark of hope in others. And yet, even through that warmth, she couldn't ignore the gnawing realization that this was only the beginning. What if Daniel had more power than she had anticipated? What if the next round of challenges was not merely verbal but something far more dangerous? Ruth's mind raced as she fought to maintain her focus, heart pounding louder than ever. Tomorrow, she announced boldly, we'll continue this. Come with your questions, your stories. We can confront the fears together. United. As community. With that, she stepped down from the stage, igniting murmurs behind her as she walked through the crowd, uncertain yet hopeful for what would come. But when she turned to look back, she couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's presence would linger like a storm cloud on the horizon. Would they stand by her side? Or would the tide of opposition swell again? The battle was far from over and Ruth knew she needed to prepare for a fight. A fight for the unity she craved, or risk allowing division to tear them apart. Ruth stepped off the stage, her heartbeat still echoing in her ears. The crowd's energy shifted, a palpable mix of excitement and concern that she could almost touch. She scanned the room, searching for kindred spirits in the sea of faces, willing to support her as she took a stand. Would they rally around her? Or would doubt snuff out the flicker of hope she had ignited? The young boy she had seen earlier, eyes full of wonder, was now standing closer, a small smile illuminating his face. It gave Ruth the strength to continue, but the shadow of Daniel loomed large in her thoughts. His words echoed in her mind like an insistent drumbeat. He was right that the world was complicated, but that didn't make her message less powerful. As she navigated the crowd, she caught snippets of conversation. Did you hear what she said about her grandmother? One woman whispered. Resilience, that's what we need now, a man replied, his brow furrowed in thought. Ruth felt a surge of energy from their murmurs. Maybe the tide was indeed turning, yet, Daniel's skepticism still gnawed at her. He seemed determined to turn the crowd against her, feeding on their fears. Something must be done, and it had to happen soon. Tomorrow would be crucial, but tonight, she was going to gather allies, find those who believed in her message. Ruth! Over here! A voice called from the back. It was Julia, her childhood friend, waving her over with urgency. Julia had always been a pillar of support, and Ruth felt relief wash over her as she joined her. "Did you see Daniel's face? He's not going to let this go," Julia said, her expression grave. "I know," Ruth replied, "but I think I got through to some of them. We can't let him drown us in doubt." Julia nodded, but her brow remained furrowed. "We need a plan. We can't just let tomorrow happen to us." The idea settled over them like a warm blanket. Ruth realized now was the time not just to speak but to gather stories, to build a network of courage that outshone Daniel's despair. Her grandmother's legacy could be the foundation of a collective movement. With renewed determination, she turned to Julia. "Let us organize a meeting tonight," Ruth said. "Bring whoever you can. People need a space where they can share their stories, their struggles and triumphs. We need to remind them that hope is powerful, especially when we come together." "Got it," Julia said, her eyes brightening. "I'll get the word out. And maybe we can make some pamphlets or something." As they pieced together their plans, the crowd began to disperse, but the energy lingered. Ruth felt lighter. She was no longer alone in her fight. That young boy had sown hope into her heart. She couldn't let him down. Just before they parted ways, Julia hesitated, her voice low. "Are you sure about confronting Daniel? He's fierce. He won't back down without a fight." Ruth winked at her, her smile unwavering. "Neither will we." As the night closed in, Ruth walked home with a mix of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow was filled with promise but also uncertainty. Would they come together in unity? Or would Daniel's voice drown out their collective cry for compassion? Arriving at her doorstep, she paused to look back, a chill creeping in despite the warmth of the streetlights. One question haunted her: what lengths would Daniel go to undermine their unity? She knew his presence was more than just a nuisance, it was a storm threatening to break the fragile peace. With that thought heavy on her mind, Ruth slipped into her home, feeling the weight of the battle ahead settle like a blanket of snow. She needed to be ready, for this was just the beginning of a fight for hope, understanding, and community. Tomorrow would reveal the true strength of their voices, but how would they stand firm against the tides of doubt? Only time would tell. Ruth awoke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her window, a soft golden glow that pushed the shadows away. She stretched, feeling the warmth on her face, but beneath that warmth was a cold knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. Today was the day. The smell of coffee wafted through the air as she shuffled into the kitchen, her fingers brushing against the countertop. She filled a mug and took a moment to breathe deeply before letting the aromatic steam calm her nerves. Each sip was a reminder of her resolve to ignite hope within her community. Julia arrived soon after, knocking briskly at the door, her face alight with a mixture of eagerness and concern. "Hey, Ruth. Have you thought about what you're going to say?" Ruth nodded, her heart pounding in time with her thoughts. "I have some ideas. I want to share our stories. I just hope I can keep everyone's attention amidst the noise." Julia smiled, a small anchor in the swirling storm of Ruth's thoughts. "You will. Just remember, this isn't just about you. It's about all of us. We need to show them that unity is our strength." They arrived at the community center early, the building still slumbering in silence. As Ruth set up the chairs, she felt an optimistic flutter. Would people come? Would they listen? The high ceiling echoed, as if waiting for the voices that would soon fill the room. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting's start time, attendees trickled in, faces familiar and new. Ruth caught a glimpse of the boy from the previous night, his mother holding his hand tightly but his eyes sparkling with curiosity. Ruth felt a pang of warmth. This was bigger than all of them, and for a moment, she let herself feel that. She took a deep breath as the room filled, the chatter settling into an expectant hush. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. "I'm here today because I believe we can make a difference as a community. We are stronger together than apart. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Ruth continued, sharing the stories of struggle and triumph that had shaped not just her life but the lives of those around her. With each word, she could see hope beginning to shine in their eyes, flickering like candles in a dark room. But then, as she spoke of resilience, Daniel burst through the door, his demeanor charged with defiance. The atmosphere shifted, tension curling in the air like smoke. "What are you trying to do here, Ruth?" he challenged, his voice sharp and unyielding. "Don't you realize you're just stirring up more conflict?" Ruth's heart raced as she steeled herself, but then she saw the young boy's worried face among the audience. That innocent hope pricked her resolve, it reminded her why she was there. "Daniel," she addressed him calmly, "we're not here to fight. We're here to connect, to share and to stand together. Isn't that what we all want?" As she spoke, she could see some audience members nodding, their eyes shifting back and forth between the two of them. Daniel's posture stiffened, outrage clashing against her unwavering conviction. Ruth knew then that this could go two ways. Would Daniel's fear-mongering silence their voices, or would unity drown out his negativity? The air grew thick with anticipation. Ruth felt the collective heartbeat of the room, and she realized that whatever they decided, it would hinge on courage. She glanced at her friends, at the boy, at everyone who had gathered in that space. What happened next was anyone's guess. Would Daniel come around or dig in deeper? Ruth took a step forward, determination ignited within her. But would her call for unity overcome Daniel's division? As silence enveloped the room once more, anxiety tangled with hope, leaving only one burning question: would they find their strength together before it was too late? Ruth felt the air grow heavier as whispered comments bounced around the room, uncertainty pressing against her like an invisible weight. Daniel's presence loomed over her, a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Yet, a quick glance at the boy's bright eyes reminded her that this moment was crucial. She couldn't back down now. "Everyone deserves to be heard," she continued, her voice firm but gentle, even when it's uncomfortable. "Let us talk about why we're here today. Let us share our stories." Daniel's sneer didn't waver, the walls around him solidifying. "And what good will that do?" he retorted. "You've got all this idealism, but what happens when the ideals clash with reality? When people like you start thinking you can change things?" In that moment, Ruth was grateful for her friend Julia's presence beside her. Julia stepped up, her confident demeanor radiating strength. "Daniel, we're not saying we have all the answers," she declared. "We're here to explore solutions. To learn from one another." The crowd began to hum, more voices rising with murmurs of agreement. Encouraged, Ruth pressed on. "Each of us has faced challenges. Each of us has fought through the darkness and searched for a glimmer of hope. Let us turn our energy into something constructive." The boy's mother squeezed his hand, and he leaned closer to her, sensing the thick emotions swirling. Ruth saw the worry in his eyes, the same worry that had driven her to plan this gathering. It was as if every worried mother in the room had shared that glance with him, their eyes shifting toward Daniel, waiting for his reaction. "You think a roomful of words will fix our problems?" Daniel barked, his voice rising. Some audience members shrank back from the confrontation, uncertain. But a few began to nod. And Ruth could hear a soft voice, one of the older gentlemen, cutting through the tension. "You know, Daniel," he started, his voice quavering slightly, "when my farm was struck by drought, we didn't just sit back and complain. We banded together, each family chipping in, sharing water, sharing advice. It brought us closer as a community. So why would we abandon that idea now?" Ruth's heart raced, hope blazing brighter within her. They were pulling together, and it felt like the room was shifting, if only by a small degree. She looked at Daniel, gauging his response. His brow furrowed, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "This isn't a fairy tale," he shouted, but the intensity began to wane, hesitance creeping in. "No, it's not," Ruth replied, her voice softer now. It's a reality we can shape together. Conflict isn't the answer, but finding common ground is where we start. Trust me, every story shared today matters. The crowd began to murmur again, discussions rippling like water spreading across a rocky shore. They were finding their voices, and Ruth felt the warm rush of possibility wash over her. But Daniel wasn't finished. And what if I don't want to connect? What if I just want to protect my own? His once loud defiance seemed to flutter, as if he too was grappling with the weight of his choices. A young woman in the front row, her hands trembling but resolved, stood up. We all want to protect what's ours, Daniel. We have to protect each other, too. Share in our fears and our hopes. It's our collective strength that will guide us through. Ruth felt the moment stretch, she could sense the tide was turning, yet every heartbeat felt suspended in time. Would Daniel realize standing apart wouldn't shield him from pain? Could he find the courage to join the circle of unity? As silence draped the crowd like a heavy blanket, Ruth whispered a silent prayer. The room was alive with emotion, a collective tension that felt fragile yet potent. Are we really ready for change? She wondered aloud, searching for answers in the faces around her. Daniel hesitated, and the air crackled with anticipation. What choice would he make? And more importantly, what would it mean for everyone's future? Would the walls of division begin to crack, or would the fear hold firm? Ruth held her breath, praying for a shift. The air felt electric, like a storm brewing, and she could sense that, deep down, Daniel was battling an internal conflict. It was more than just pride, it was fear. Ruth looked at the faces around her, some hopeful, others skeptical, but all were holding their breath, waiting for Daniel's next move. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. Ruth thought she saw a flicker of vulnerability. Maybe he wasn't just the angry boy she had faced earlier. Maybe he was a young man, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations, trying to carve out a place in a world that felt chaotic and unforgiving. Look, Daniel, Julia said gently, breaking the silence that felt almost suffocating. We get it. You think you need to protect yourself first, but what if we could build something together? Something stronger than walls. Daniel looked up slowly, his fierce exterior beginning to crack. I don't want to end up vulnerable. It's not safe, he said, voice trembling slightly. Having a community doesn't make you weak, the older gentleman added. It makes you part of something bigger. We're stronger when we're together. I know firsthand. I've been through hard times, and it's those around me who helped pull me out of the darkness. Ruth felt a surge of warmth inside her. The older man's words were like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. If Daniel chose to reach for it, there might be a chance for him to understand. You think you can keep your heart locked up and that will protect you? Julia pressed on, her voice full of conviction. What happens when that lock breaks? You'll be left with nothing but isolation and anger. It eats you alive. Daniel's expression shifted. Ruth could see he was listening, really listening this time. The defiance was dimming. Sometimes the young woman from earlier spoke with a soft, newfound confidence. I feel more afraid of standing alone than I do of being vulnerable. In a community, we can share burdens. Let each other in, it allows us to heal. That was it. Ruth felt the momentum building, tension giving way to something almost tangible, hope. They were all reaching out toward Daniel, not with aggression, but with compassion. The silence thickened, and it felt as if the room held its breath alongside Daniel. Finally, he shifted his weight, his posture loosening just a bit, like a weakened dam barely holding back the flow of water. What if I try? He whispered, almost as if he were scared to voice the idea aloud. The collective gasp in the room was palpable. Ruth could hardly believe what she was hearing. What if you do? She replied, her voice steady. What if you allow yourself to connect, even if it's just a little? Daniel looked around him, and for the first time, he caught the eye of the boy beside his mother. The boy smiled, a simple gesture, but it held so much promise. It was a moment of connection, an invitation to be part of something. It's not about giving up who you are, Julia added. It's about building each other up. Together. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that strength is found in unity, not isolation. Ruth felt a swell of emotion as Daniel took a tentative step closer to the group. The walls around him were beginning to crumble. And then came a small voice from the back, trembling but bold. "I want to share my story," it said. The crowd turned to see a girl rise, her eyes shining with determination. "I think we can find light even in darkness." Ruth's heart soared. They were swinging open doors together. This was exactly what she had hoped for, the spark of transformation, but just as hope began to bloom, Daniel's face hardened again, and he retreated slightly, confusion flickering back in his eyes. "What if I mess it up? What if I can't connect?" The energy shifted once more, leaving Ruth anxious. Would fear snatch away this chance before it truly began? As the crowd awaited Daniel's final answer, the weight of the moment felt monumental. What road would he choose? Would he step into the light of connection, or would he retreat back into the shadows of isolation? With hearts racing and patience wavering, they held their breath, balancing on the precipice of change. Daniel's gaze darted around the room, uncertainty etched across his features. Each face looking back at him was filled with encouragement, a shared breath of hope that was almost palpable. For a moment, he looked like he might falter, like a dancer on the edge of a stage, wrestling with the fear of the spotlight. "Messing up doesn't mean you fail," Julia said, her voice cutting through the silence like a warm embrace. "It's part of learning. It's part of being human. We've all stumbled and tripped, but we got back up. Together." Her words lingered in the air, soft yet powerful. Daniel's shoulders visibly relaxed, and Ruth could see he was slowly beginning to let down his defenses. "There's power in vulnerability," the older gentleman added, his tone filled with the sincerity of years lived and lessons learned. "You might be surprised at how liberating it can feel to share your struggles. It can lift a weight that you didn't even know you were carrying." Ruth observed Daniel closely. There was something in the way he clenched his fists and then released them. The quiet conflict on his face was shifting. The walls weren't just cracking, they were splintering. She felt a surge of hope course through her. Maybe this was the pivotal moment for all of them, not just him. "Okay," Daniel said, still hesitant. He stepped forward, taking a breath that seemed to fill the room with possibility. "I'll try," but he paused, a shadow crossing his eyes. "I don't know how." "That's the best part," Julia said, her smile radiant. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just start. Speak from your heart." For a moment, the room felt electric again, but this time, there was excitement charged in the air instead of fear. Ruth caught the eye of the girl with determination earlier. She nodded, as if to say, "We're here for you." Daniel shifted again, this time standing more upright, and the tension in his body began to dissipate. "I've never really talked about, anything," he admitted slowly. "But I've felt so alone. Like no one could really understand me." The murmurs of empathy rippled through the crowd. Ruth's heart ached for him. Everyone had felt that sting of loneliness at some point. It was a universal experience, one that tied them all together in their shared humanity. "Tell us what you can," the girl urged softly. "You'd be surprised at how many others might relate to your story. It could shine a light on paths we never knew existed." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, an ember of courage flickering to life. I guess I've been holding on to all this anger," he murmured, almost to himself. "But it hurts more than I thought it would. And I know it's pushing people away." Ruth felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. This was it. This was the moment where hearts began to open. The compassionate sincerity of the room wrapped around Daniel like a warm blanket. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," the older gentleman said, leaning forward slightly. Whatever it is, we will listen without judgment. Daniel took a deep breath, the kind that seemed to gather years of pain, and uncertainty, and tiny fragments of hope. I've been afraid for so long. He raised his voice slightly, almost daring to be vulnerable. Afraid that if I open up, if I let you in, you'll reject me. No one here is going to turn their back on you, Julia assured him, her eyes keen and focused. Then, Daniel started, hesitating still but with a newfound resolve, then I guess it's time I at least try to share. Maybe I can find strength in this community you keep talking about. As he spoke, the room felt like it exhaled, each person embracing the weight of his words and the shared experiences they now carried. Ruth felt a warmth fill her chest. Finally, they were moving towards something more than just a heartfelt gesture. It was real connection, but just then, the door creaked open, and a familiar face from the past stepped into the room, causing Daniel's eyes to widen in surprise. The tension shifted again, and everyone turned to see who had entered. Would this new arrival bring more clarity, or would it send Daniel spiraling back into the shadows? Only time would tell. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the figure standing in the doorway. It was Ryan, his childhood friend, someone he hadn't seen in years. Ryan looked different, a bit worn, but there was a familiar spark in his eyes that both comforted and terrified Daniel all at once. The room shifted from a haven of warmth to a tense battleground of memories and unresolved emotions. Ryan? Daniel whispered, almost incredulously. A flicker of hope mingled with fear surged through him. Ryan took a few hesitant steps forward, glancing around as if sizing up the situation. Dan, I didn't know you were here, he stuttered, his own surprise evident as he scanned the faces in the room. As the crowd's expressions turned from welcoming to wary, Ruth noticed how tightly Daniel's fists were clenched. He was inches away from a breaking point, and this unexpected visit felt like an obstacle pushing him back into the very shadows they had just begun to lift away. Why are you here? Daniel's voice cracked, but there was a tone of accusation buried beneath his words. I came to apologize, Ryan said, lowering his head. Things got rough between us after everything happened. I thought it was better to stay away. The air thickened with tension. Daniel's relief at seeing Ryan was quickly suffocated by a rush of memories, the fights, the betrayals, the way their friendship had fractured. Better for whom? You left me to deal with it all alone, he replied, his anger bubbling to the surface. Ruth took a step forward, sensing the need for connection amidst the chaos. Ryan, maybe you could explain what happened, all those years ago. It will help. It might help both of you. Daniel shot her a confused look, grappling with the idea of letting Ryan into the circle just when he was starting to open up. I just thought you were better off without me, Ryan murmured, his eyes glistening with regret. I didn't want to be the reminder of all the pain. Pain isn't something we can run from, Julia interjected, her voice steady and gentle. It's something we confront together. The crowd leaned in, drawn to the tension unfolding before them. Daniel felt a war raging inside him. Did he dare peel back the layers of hurt nestled in his heart? Could he even bear to share this moment with someone who had walked away when he needed him most? Slowly, Ryan took another step, his gaze locked on Daniel. I messed up, Dan. I thought I could leave, Just walk away from our past. I didn't see how much I was hurting you. Daniel's heart drummed in his chest. You didn't see it, or you didn't care. A shroud of silence settled in the room, filled only by the sounds of a breath caught, of hearts racing. Everyone was on edge, witnessing this reconnection that could either heal old wounds or deepen them. Ruth felt a knot of anticipation tightening in her throat. As she glanced at the others, she felt that urge to rush in and support Daniel, to stand firm beside him. But this was his moment. I'm tired of feeling alone, Daniel said, his voice quieter now. But I don't know if I can let you back in. A collective breath surged through the room, the magnitude of Daniel's admission hanging thick in the air. It was a chance to break free from the chains of the past, but also a risk that tested loyalties anew. Ryan took another step forward, his eyes misting with sincere emotion. "Let me show you I can be different. Let us not keep fighting our shadows. Let's face them together." Tension danced in the air, and Daniel's brows knitted in contemplation, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. Would he find the courage to welcome Ryan back, to trust again, or was this simply another trap waiting to surface? As the question lingered and all eyes remained fixed on Daniel, the door creaked ominously once more, signaling the arrival of someone else. Would this new presence bring clarity or chaos to a moment already fraught with emotions and unresolved histories? Only time would reveal. The door swung open, and in stepped a woman with a familiar face, Sophie, Daniel's mother. Her eyes darted around the room, absorbing the tension that had enveloped them. For a moment, time slowed, and silence blanketed the gathering, hearts beating in sync as they held their collective breath. "Daniel!" she exclaimed, her voice quivering with concern as she rushed to him. "I heard you were here. I had to come." The weight in the air thickened, and Daniel's expression shifted. His mother's presence brought a flood of memories, some warm, some bittersweet. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice cracked. Sophie reached for his arm, her touch soft and grounding. "I saw how far you've pulled away. I wanted to remind you don't have to face this alone. Just like Ryan, huh?" Daniel snapped defensively, pulling his arm away. "When did everyone suddenly decide to show up when it's convenient?" Sophie's eyes glimmered with compassion. "This isn't about convenience or blame. It's about supporting one another, sharing burdens, and remembering that we're all on this journey together even through the hardest of times. Why should I trust any of you?" Daniel's voice quaked, uncertainty swirling beneath the surface. Ruth felt the room tighten around Daniel, the air heavy with a shared hope for connection. "Because we're all scared and healing," she said, stepping forward to stand with him. "You're not alone in your fears or feelings. We've spent too long shying away from the pain. But facing it together? That's where the real power lies." Sophie stepped back, giving him space to absorb her words. The crowd began to murmur with increasing encouragement, signaling to Daniel that it was safe to open up. Murmurs of support rippled through the room. "You've got this, Daniel," Julia urged gently. "We want to hear what you're feeling." Caught in the swirl of emotions from rage to fear to hesitant hope, Daniel felt the layers of his anger beginning to unravel. "I was lost after everything happened," he started quietly, fighting the emotions that bubbled to the surface. "When things fell apart, I felt abandoned. It felt like a wall went up, and I didn't know how to let it down. I didn't want anyone to see the hurt." His voice broke as he spoke, and Ruth felt a rush of compassion for him. "We've all been through the fire," she said, sincerity pouring out. "Holding it inside only makes it harder. Letting people in means we're one step closer to healing." Daniel looked around, his eyes lingering on Ryan, and then to Sophie. Can I really trust you all again?" The hesitance remained, but each pair of eyes in the room sparkled with understanding. "Trust doesn't happen overnight," Sophie replied, her voice steady. "But it grows from small moments of honesty, vulnerability. It's about taking a chance together." The warmth of her words began to melt barriers within Daniel. "I want to try," he admitted, letting the murmurs of support wrap around him. "But I'm scared." "Scared is okay," Ruth assured him. "It's normal. It just means you're human. And when you allow that vulnerability, you might discover the strength in becoming part of something greater." A hush fell over the room, yet a sense of safety blossomed. Daniel looked at his old friends. "I've missed this," he confessed, pain lacing his vulnerability. "And it hurts even more to see how I turned my back on it." He looked over at Ryan, the anger dissolving into something softer. "I always wanted us to stay close, it got harder after everything. Ryan nodded, emotion swelling. I know. But I shouldn't have run away. I'm sorry I didn't reach out. Let us work on this, together. Daniel's heart raced. Could he really reconcile the past? The courage of the room seemed to echo in his chest. Okay, he said, determination brightening his expression. Let us start there. Together. The atmosphere shifted, laughter bubbling up, and as the walls of mistrust began to crumble, a wave of clapping broke out. Ruth felt tears of joy prick at her eyes. The tide was turning, hope had taken root. As the room filled with smiles and chatter, Ruth realized they had forged a new path, one of togetherness, resilience, and shared healing. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. They would continue to grow, to share their stories and confront their fears, as a community. The laughter and voices intertwined like a comforting melody, wrapping them all in a sense of belonging. Daniel had stepped into the light, and in doing so, he had led them all forward into a new dawn of understanding. Ruth held on to hope tightly and knew the journey ahead would not be simple. But it was one worth taking as they stood arm in arm, ready for whatever the future might hold. Now, it was time for action. If you enjoyed this heartfelt transformation, you need to subscribe now to our channel. This is the moment to show your support for the community we're building together. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment below your thoughts, feelings, and reactions to this incredible journey. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation unfold. Together, we can spread the light.